So, this is going to be a daily practice, pretty short practice that you can do every day. You can do parts of this practice, you can do the whole practice. Um, let's just dig in and get started. So, for the warm up, before we get started, we need to warm our bodies up. We also need to ground and center, right? So, just take a moment. What does ground and center mean? Just take a moment and notice literally what the ground feels like underneath you, whether you're sitting on the floor, whether you're sitting outside, whether you're sitting on a mat. Just notice what that feels like. Notice where the ground is meeting your body. Where is it supporting you? And see if you can kind of relax down into that support, right? We tend to, when we're sitting, when we're expecting something to happen, sit up nice and tall, muscles are engaged. You might be able to see my knees lifted up off the mat a little bit. Yours might stay off the mat. That's okay, right? But then when I sort of relax down into that, right? My posture isn't quite as perfect, but I'm allowing the muscles to soften a little bit, release some of that tension where I can, right? And allow the ground to support me. And while you're doing this, while you're working on relaxing into that connection with ground, maybe put your hand out and just touch wherever you're sitting. Notice what you're sitting on, right? Maybe you're sitting on a hardwood floor, on a mat, on carpet, on grass. Um, just notice what that feels like under your hand, right? Notice the texture, right? Is it fuzzy? Is it rough? Right? I'm on a mat, so that's kind of rubbery. Maybe it's smooth if you're on tile or hardwood. And notice how much give it has, right? Is it soft? Is it hard? Right? There's a little bit of give to this mat, right? When I push. Maybe even notice the temperature of the mat or the floor or whatever the ground is underneath you. And then let's shift gears a little bit. Notice your breath. Just get curious about it, right? Get curious about where in your body you feel movement when you breathe in. And where do you feel movement when you breathe out? Let's try it again. Where might you feel maybe the sensation of your body expanding when you breathe in? You might feel that sensation as you expand into other parts of your body, right? My rib cage is kind of expanding into my arms. And then the next time you breathe out, notice maybe that sensation of contraction, maybe release or even a squeezing feeling, right? Take a couple more breaths like that, just noticing what that feels like and where you feel movement. And then again, get curious about maybe do you feel your breath more in the upper part of your torso near your sternum? When you expand, does that rise? Or maybe you feel more expansion on the inhale, maybe around your rib cage or just underneath your rib cage, sort of in the middle of your torso. Maybe you feel it all the way down into your lower abdomen. Maybe you don't. Just see if you can get curious about where you feel it. See if you can identify it. If you can't, that's okay, right? It's all about sort of exploration. From here, we're going to do 6 movements of the spine. I'm going to give you 2 options for doing this first pose. It's cat cow. And the first option is to do it seated, right? You can do it seated like I am. crisscross applesauce, otherwise known as easy seated pose, or you can do it on all fours. I will show you how to do it seated first. So first, root down into that connection with ground. What do I mean by that? What I mean is those sit bones, right? Those two little bones at the bottom of your pelvis, and they're kind of U-shaped, right? Press down through those bones the best you can, right? Maybe you feel your core engage and sit up nice and tall. Really lift the top of your head toward the ceiling or the sky, right? So as you're pressing down, you're lifting through the top of your head, right? And then on your inhale, lift the sternum up toward the ceiling. Gently lift the chin, the shoulders maybe roll away from the ears. Ears stay in line with the shoulders, right? Don't allow the head to drop way back like this, right? Keep the ears in line with the shoulders. And then on the exhale, we're going to come back in the opposite direction. We're going to allow the spine to round, the head to come forward. Pause here for a moment. And then on your inhale, come back in the opposite direction, right? Inhaling into, this is called cow pose, otherwise known as spinal extension in the sagittal plane. And then exhale. This is cat pose, otherwise known as spinal flexion in the sagittal plane. So that's front and back. Sagittal plane of movement is front and back, right? So if you're continuing to do these seated, go ahead and stay seated and continue this movement. If you would like to do it on all fours, feel free to come over onto all fours in what is known as table pose. Stack your knees underneath your hips, right? So knees should be underneath the hip bones. I like to tuck my toes for stability. Wrists should be under shoulders, right? And then bend the elbows so that they're pointing this way, right? The elbows are pointing this way. The soft part of the elbow is pointing forward-ish, right? And then from here, you'll begin to point your tailbone down toward the ground as you round into the spine. Allow the head to drop. And then on your inhale, come back in the opposite direction. Lift the tailbone. Allow the belly to drop toward the floor. Lift the chin, look up. Exhale, rounding the spine for cat pose. Inhale, arching the spine, spinal extension for cow pose. Go ahead and continue to cycle through these movements for the next few breaths. You can go as fast or slow as you'd like to move. You can move into these poses as far as you'd like to move. If you rolled over on all fours and that doesn't feel comfortable to you, feel free to come back to a seated position, right? But really all we're doing is flexing the spine. This is spinal flexion. And extending the spine. First two movements of the spine in the sagittal plane, forward and back, right? I promise you, you're not doing it wrong, right? It's all about exploration. All right, so whenever you finish your next round, come back to center. So if you're staying on all fours, come back to a neutral table pose. See how my spine is nice and straight. I'm kind of pressing away from the floor here. If you have wrist pain or shoulder pain when you're doing this, grip the mat, right? And bend the elbows a little bit. If it still hurts when you do that, come back to a seated position. All right, so second two movements of the spine, this time in the coronal plane. So we're going side to side. So bring your right arm out to the right side and then inhale. Reach the right arm up and over and then see if you can press the right hip into the floor or the ground, right? Reach it up and over, press the right hip into the floor or ground. And as you do this, right, we're trying to reach maybe to find some sensation here in the side body. If you don't feel it, that's okay, right? But reach and just see, don't overreach, right? Don't hurt yourself. Reach and see if maybe you can feel stretching somewhere in this side of the body. If this side of the body feels like it's pinching, right, or it's uncomfortable over here, lift the head and reach up a little more, right? Good. And then exhale, bring that arm down. Left arm reaches up and over. Really press down into that left hip again, trying to find that sensation of stretch on this side of the body. If this side of the body feels like it's kind of pinching, uncomfortable, collapsed, lift up through the crown of the head, right? Exhale, bring that down. Go ahead and make it dynamic. Inhaling up, exhaling down. Dynamic just means we're moving through these poses rather than staying in them, staying still in them, right? That would be static, right? So if you're going to remain seated, continue to do this movement seated. If you are on all fours, table pose, come back into your table pose. Remember that alignment, knees under hips, wrists under shoulders, send the elbows so that they're pointing back toward your thighs, right? Press away from the mat. From here, you'll lift your right arm and reach it out in front of you, and then reach it over to the side. And then exhale, bring that arm down. Inhale, left arm reaches up and down. So same movement, right? But this time just on all fours. I can only reach so far without attacking my tree here. So continue through a few more rounds, whichever way you're doing this, seated or on all fours. And then once you finish your next round, go ahead and come back to center. This last one, we're all going to do seated. Okay. So if you're on all fours, go ahead and come to a seat. I'm going to do the last two movements of the spine, 6 total, right? 2 in the sagittal, 2 in the coronal. And now we're going to do the transverse, which means twist, right? So again, think about those 2 little U-shaped bones at the bottom of your pelvis. Press down into those, press those into the ground and lift through the crown of your head. Maybe you can feel the muscles in your core engage. I actually feel the muscles in my legs engage when I do this. You might feel it in a different place. That's okay. On your inhale, reach your arms up. Reach as though you're trying to reach something above you. Not super far, but just kind of like, whatever it is, give me that, right? Reach as though you're trying to reach something above you. And then on your next exhale, twist. I'm twisting toward the right. And then bring the arms down, right? All the way down. So I've got my left hand on my right knee and my right hand behind me. You don't have to twist into this as far as I'm twisting. Notice how this feels in your body, right? See if you can identify where you feel a stretch, right? And it might be difficult to differentiate. We're just getting curious about it, right? Maybe where you feel a stretch, where do you feel muscle tension or engagement, right? I feel stretch through this side of my body, right? From my back all the way around to my rib cage, right? And I feel it a little bit under my right arm. I feel engagement in my core. My core is actually engaging to keep me in this place. And my right shoulder is engaging the muscles of my right arm. Yours might be different. Just kind of get curious about it, right? Inhale. Reach the arms up, root down, press down into those bones at the bottom of the pelvis. They're called ischium. And then exhale to twist and lower the arms. Same thing on this side. You might not be able to twist as far on the side. You might be able to twist farther. Each side of the body is a little bit different because of the way that we use them differently. And sometimes there's some structural differences. That's okay, right? But just notice how this feels in your body. If you're twisting too far, if it feels uncomfortable, back out of it a little bit. That's okay, right? So on this side, we're going to notice, right? Does it feel uncomfortable? Does it not? And then I want you to go ahead and back out maybe an inch or 2, right? And then think about gently, ever so gently lifting the sternum up and then broadening the collarbones, right? So that's pulling the shoulders kind of gently back, not too hard, just gently back. We're squeezing the shoulder blades together just a little bit, right? And then from there, we're going to twist more from the upper part of the spine, the mid spine, right? Rather than the lower part of the spine. So keep the sternum up. See if you can keep the shoulder blades pulling down the back gently, not hard, right? We don't want to be doing this, right? Just very gentle movement. And then inhale, go ahead and bring it up, unwind back to center, right? We're going to not do that one dynamically just for today. All right. So now we're going to work a little bit on some core strength. So from here, if you're going to remain seated, right, that's what this looks like, right? So core strength, you're going to bring both hands to the outsides of your hips. Legs are extended. I have my feet flexed, so I'm pulling my toes gently back toward my face and pressing through my heels, almost like I'm trying to push gently into an imaginary wall, right? I'm going to press down into my hands and lengthen through the crown of my head. So I get a little bit of a lift, right? So that's engaging my core muscles to be able to do that. And then I might lift my right leg and then put it down. And then lift my left leg and then put it down, right? So that's going to become dynamic in a moment, but that's what that movement looks like if you're staying seated. If you'd like to come over on all fours, you can do so now. So from here, again, stack the knees and the hips, the wrists and the elbows. I like to tuck my toes for stability. Bend the elbows back so that the elbows are pointing toward your thighs. From here, press away, press into the palms and press away from the ground. So we've got a little bit of arch in the upper spine. If you can see just a little bit, right? We're not doing this, right? But pressing away enough to get a little bit of arch in the upper spine, and then kind of gaze just in front of you, right? So if you have a mat, you're gazing toward the front edge of the mat. Lift your right hand and then reach it out in front of you, right? Option to stay here. This might be enough for you. Squeeze the muscles of your core. Left foot, if you're going to move it up a little bit, left foot is going to extend. The left leg's going to extend, toes to the ground. Option to stay here. Or you might lift that left leg up so that's in alignment with your hip. Exhale, bring both the arm and the leg back down. Right? Again, if you're doing it seated, when I lift my arm and leg, you're lifting just your leg and pressing into the ground, right? On all fours, reach your left arm out in front of you. And then again, if that's where you're at, stay there, right? Otherwise, you might bring your right leg back behind you, extending it, toes on the ground. If that is where you're at, stay there. Otherwise, go ahead and lift that leg up to hip height. Flex the foot, right? Press in through the heel, reach through the fingertips. Go ahead and bring that down. We're going to cycle through just a few more of those. Reaching right arm, maybe left leg extends, maybe it lifts. Bring it back down. Left arm, maybe right leg extends, maybe it lifts. Bring it back down. Go ahead and do a couple more on your own. If you go a little too far into it, you start trying to lift your leg, you feel out of balance, take it back a notch, right? You can always put those toes back on the floor. You can always just extend the arm or come back to a seat if you need to. The point is to kind of get curious about where you're at and stop judging yourself, right? If you're not here, that's okay, right? Go ahead and come back to center. If you are seated, I'll show you a forward fold. If you are on all fours and it feels comfortable to do so, take the knees wide, bring the feet closer together, sit the hips back, reach the arms forward. The forehead can rest on the floor, or you can stack your fists and rest your head on your fists. If you're seated, If you're on all fours, stay there. That's child's pose. If you're seated, you can bend the knees a little bit, lengthen through the crown of the head, and come into a little bit of a forward fold, gazing down at the floor. So as we go through this practice, it's important to recognize, right, that as a yoga teacher, not only do I do this stuff all the time, so I have a lot of practice doing it because I teach it, right? I've been teaching for 8 years now, and I have been practicing yoga for almost 30 years. So if you see something that looks easy for me and my body, remember, if it's not easy for you, that's okay, especially if you just started doing this. But even if you've been doing it for a long time, right? This is my job. I do it all the time. I've been doing it for a really long time, right? So if any of those judgmental thoughts start to enter your mind, right? Like, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. I'm doing it wrong. And I know that those thoughts enter some people's minds because people have told me that they do, right? Just remember, especially if you're just starting out, right? But even if you're not, everybody's body is a little bit different. And we all have different levels of practice, right? If this is new to you and it's difficult when it looks easy for me, that's because I've been doing it for a long time. It just takes practice. All right. So from here, we're going to do another pose. It's called Cradle the Baby. So the first option is to sit crisscross applesauce like this. Sit up nice and tall, right? Press down into those sit bones, those two U-shaped bones at the bottom of the pelvis. Lengthen through the crown of the head. Maybe we feel the core muscles engage, right? Maybe we feel the low spine muscles engage, right? That's okay. As long as it doesn't hurt, you're not doing it wrong, right? So this is my my left leg, right? I'm taking my left leg. I'm going to take my left hand and place it on my left knee, my right hand, and grab my left foot, right? And then keeping the spine nice and long, press down into the sit bones, lift through the head. Lift the leg up a little bit, right? You might not be here. You might be down here, or maybe it looks more like this to you. That's okay, right? You might come all the way up here and still not feel anything. That's okay too, right? As long as it doesn't hurt. And one thing that we want to try and do, I'm going to turn this way so you can see my spine. We want to try not to do this where we're kind of bent over and hugging it in. And we want to try to keep a nice long spine. So if you have to hold your leg down a little further, that's fine. And then we're going to rock it. If this does not feel steady for you and you need to extend the leg, that's fine. If this still does not work for you, come down to your back. Rotate the knee out, right? We're going to allow the knee to fall out and then cross the ankle over the opposite knee, right? So it looks like I have a figure 4 here. And then bring both legs in toward your sternum or your rib cage, right? You might be able to bring one hand through this hole made by your leg, right, through the middle of the 4, and then the other hand around the side. Maybe you can grab the back of your thigh. If you can't, that's okay. Take a couple of breaths wherever you're at, whether you're seated or laying on your back, right? Seated, it looks like this. And then put that leg down. We're going to switch sides. So if you're on your back, same thing, opposite side. I'll show you again in a moment. If you're seated, start out crisscross applesauce. This time I've got my right leg. So I'm going to put my right hand on my right knee. Left hand grabs my right foot. And then bring that leg up to wherever you're comfortable. Make sure you're pressing into the sit bones and lengthening through the crown of the head. Go ahead and rock. If you need to extend the leg, extend the leg. Again, if you're doing this on your back, come to lay down. Allow this knee, right? The knee that I didn't do, right? My right knee for me, to drop out to the side. And then cross that ankle over the opposite knee and bring it in toward your torso. Maybe You can lace the hand through, right? So this would be my right hand through the figure four, and then bring the other hand behind, clasp behind the left thigh. You do not have to pull hard, right? Just allow the weight of your own body, your legs, to do the work for you. Wherever you're at, take a few breaths here, and then release. All right. So from here, bend the knees, feet flat on the floor, whether you're laying down or sitting up, and just windshield wiper the legs. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is a sun salutation, right? If you are brand new to sun salutations, I have another video that breaks them down in three different ways, right? So if you're brand new at it, maybe you're feeling like you have a little less energy today, or maybe you have an injury or something preventing you from doing them standing. Sun salutations can be fairly intensive if you're not used to doing them or if you have some kind of injury. So there's another video that I have. So if you go out back to my channel, I've got sun salutations three ways. You can watch that video for a breakdown, because if I break it all down here, this video is going to be super long. So go back out, do that if you're not familiar with sun salutations. If you are familiar with sun salutations or you just want to try it, go ahead and come to stand. So from here, we're going to stand with our feet. I like to stand a little wider than hips distance apart, right? So what does hips distance mean? That means the feet are directly under the hips. So for me, that looks like this, straight line from my hips all the way down through the heel of my foot, right? But for me, I actually like to step just a smidge wider, right? Now my feet are not directly, I've got a little bit of an angle here. Either one is fine. What you don't want to do is this. You don't want the feet hugged in together, right? So find where you feel most comfortable, most stable, right? Lift and spread the toes a couple of times, place them down on the mat. Maybe find a gentle rocking forward and back. Just notice what that feels like on your feet, right? Notice your weight shifting from heel to toe. Notice the feeling of the engagement and the muscles of the legs. Just get curious about it, right? You're not supposed to feel any one thing or the other, right? Just kind of get curious, explore what you're feeling. Where might you feel some tension as your muscles contract to allow you to perform this movement, this swaying, rocking forward and back, right? Stop there, and then maybe a little side to side, right? Notice how it feels to roll your weight to the edge of one foot and then maybe to the edge of the other foot. We're not doing great big movement here, right? Very gentle, swaying from side to side, right? Notice again, where do you feel the muscles engage in your body, right? You might feel them in your feet, you might feel them in your legs, maybe your hips, maybe your core, maybe your shoulders, right? Where are these muscles engaging to allow you to perform this action, this movement? All right, so go ahead and come to stillness and kind of wiggle your feet around and decide where you feel your weight evenly balanced, right? Between the outer edges of the foot, right? So everybody's foot has usually a little bit of an arch right here on the inside, right? I don't have much of an arch at all when I'm standing. So I have to roll my weight a little bit to the outer edges of my feet, very gentle roll to allow for an arch there, right? To allow my weight to be balanced between my heel and along the outer edge and just underneath my toes, right? So wiggle your feet around. Notice where you feel like you are evenly balanced in both feet. And then press down into that. Press down into that enough to maybe feel the muscles in the legs engage, right? You might even feel the muscles in your core engage. Stand up nice and tall. Inhale, breathe in, reach the arms up. I'm going to change this camera angle just a tad so you can see me. exhale. All right. Inhale, reach the arms up, right? You can't see, but I'm reaching again, almost as though there's something in front of me. And then exhale, coming into a forward fold. When I forward fold, you might notice I bend my knees so that I can bring my ribs closer to my thighs. You can do the same thing. This allows maybe the top of the body, the head, the shoulders to hang. You can clasp opposite elbows here, like you're crossing your arms kind of, and maybe sway from side to side if that feels okay to you, right? Notice if you feel a stretch here, maybe in the back of the leg, maybe not. And then on your next in breath, you're going to come up halfway, right? Lift the torso up just halfway. So we have this straight line in the back. And then we're going to reach through the crown of the head and then exhale, come back into that fold. This time we're placing the hands on the floor or the mat, bend deeply into the knees. So we're almost coming into a squat, both hands on the floor. Step your left foot back. The right foot stays forward. If you need to put something under your hands here, you can pause the video and go get something that is similar to a yoga block. You can do a box, you can do books, whatever works for you. All right. So from here, drop the back knee. You can keep these toes tucked if you want to. And then on your next inhale, we're going to twist. So lengthen the spine. Lift up through the head. You're going to point your head toward wherever, right? The sort of diagonal line. And then twist to the right, opening the arm. You can even bring that arm up and over if that feels okay to you. And then exhale. Bring both hands back to the mat. Press into the mat, lift the back knee. We'll be stepping into plank. If plank is not for you, you can drop your knees. Step into plank first and then drop the knees, right? Because we want this diagonal line. You really don't want to do this. This isn't going to give you that upper body workout, right? But you can drop the knees and have this diagonal line. I'm actually leaning a little too far into this. I want my wrists under my shoulders, so adjust as necessary, right? So coming into plank, whatever that looks like for you, we're pressing away from the mat, right? And then from here, you're going to spin the elbows back behind you, like you're spinning them back toward the thighs. Send the shoulders forward and then lower down, right? You can lower down all at once, or you can lower down knees, then chin, then belly. Take a break here. Go ahead and cross your hands in front of you, stacking one hand over the other. And lay the head on the hands. You can turn the feet inward, the toes inward. Or if you'd like to, you can lift the legs, bending the knees, maybe windshield wiper, the legs from side to side. All right. So go ahead and bring those legs down. If you've got them up, windshield wipering. Lift the head a little bit. Place both hands underneath the shoulders. Draw the shoulders down the spine, right? So we're hugging them down and back. We're kind of pinching the shoulder blades together a little bit, just gently. And then think about the tailbone, right? You want to point that toward the backs of your knees to engage the core, right? And then lift the sternum, the shoulders, and the head for baby cobra, right? Don't press in and do this, right? That's not going to be good for your back. Just lifting the sternum, the shoulders, and the head and gaze forward. Keep the core engaged if you can by pointing the tailbone to the backs of your knees. From here, tuck your toes and then press into the palms. You can come into table first if you like. Option 1 would be puppy pose, where you sit the hips back, but not quite into child's pose. Notice my head isn't touching the floor, but I'm reaching my arms out in front of me. That's option 1. Option 2 would be to lift the knees and press the hips up and back for downward facing dog. From here, you're going to press into the palms of the hands, grip the mat, okay? grip the mat, spin the elbows, the soft part, forward-ish, right? It's not going to go all the way forward, but forward-ish. Press into the thumb and your first finger, your pointer finger. You can bend into the knees a little bit here if you need to bring your ribs closer to thighs. You don't have to bring your heels to the floor. Mine are not at the floor. My knees are bent, right? But your spine should be long. Keep pressing to get those hips back as far as you can without hurting yourself. Do not hurt yourself. It's uncomfortable. Come out of it. From here, if you're on your knees or if you'd like to come down to your knees, maybe you need a break. That's okay. You're going to lift your right leg up and back, and then you can externally rotate the knee and then bring that knee toward the elbow. I'm going to do it on the other side so you can see. Knee toward the elbow, right? And we're going to step that foot up in between the palms. It may not land there. You may have to grab it and scooch it up. That's okay, right? But we want to try and get it in between the palms. If you want to come into down dog and try a step forward, that's what that's called, right? Same thing from down dog. Lift the leg up and back, bend the knee, bring it toward the elbow, and place it in between the palms. Whatever works best for you. All right. So this should be the opposite leg than what we started with, right? So I'm going to switch. Right. Okay. So now step the back foot up to meet the front and come into your forward fold. Bending into the knees, bringing the ribs closer to thighs. Maybe you clasp opposite elbows. Allow the head and torso to hang. Inhale up halfway, straighten the spine. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, sweep the arms out and all the way up. And hands meet in front of heart space. Good. Shake it out. Right? All right. So from here, if you want more activity, we're about 40 minutes into this now. If you want more activity, do another one of those. Rewind this, go back and do it again, or go out and find the Sun Salutation 3 Ways video and do one of those. Other ways, come on down to your backs. Come all the way down. Place the feet flat on the floor. Lift the hips just a little bit. Point the tailbone to the back of the knees, and then replace the hips back down on the floor. Tuck the shoulder blades underneath, right? Just a gentle, subtle movement. See if you can get the shoulder blades flat on the floor. Bring your hands down next to your hips, right? From here, press down into the mat with your feet. So pressing into the mat with the feet, and then press down into the palms of the hands. Slowly begin to lift the hips. You don't need to come up super high, maybe only 80 or 90% of how high you can go, right? And then slowly begin to roll the spine back down. One vertebrae at a time, if you can. And then again, press down into the feet, press down into the hands. This time, begin to point the tailbone to the backs of the knees. It's often referred to as tuck the tailbone. So much that the hips begin to lift, pressing into the feet, lift the hips again. Nice big deep breath here. Exhale, roll down. Option to do that again, if you'd like, or if you do happen to have a block, books, something of this nature that can support your body weight, you can take it. You can even use a pillow or a rolled up blanket if you want to, and put it underneath your hips at the very base of the spine, right? Take a nice big deep breath here. This is called supported bridge. Before we were doing an active bridge. If you need more activity, feel free to do a couple more active bridges. From here, maybe just ever so gently, windshield wiper the legs from side to side. And then remove the block. And everyone hug the knees in toward the sternum or the rib cage. Maybe rock a little from side to side to massage the spine. The next time you're rocking over to the right side, you might take that block, blanket, hook, whatever, place it where you think your knees are going to land, and then allow both knees to drop over onto that, keeping the shoulders on the floor if you can. The hands can come to the torso. You can extend them out into a T shape or a goalpost shape if that feels okay to you. You can leave them along the sides of your body, whatever feels comfortable to you to do with your arms. Feel free to do so. From here, bring both knees back to the center and then take the block over to the other side, about where you think your knees are going to drop on the left side, and then drop both knees over. You can adjust the block as necessary. Try to keep the shoulders on the floor. Hands can come to wherever you're comfortable. And finally, bring the knees back to center. Extend both legs if this feels good to you. If it doesn't, find another position that does. You can come to lay on your side with your knees hugged in sort of a C shape, also known as fetal position. You can come to sit if you want. If there's another posture or pose or position that feels best to you, feel free to take this. This is your moment to relax after all your hard work. So take a breath here. Again, notice what the ground feels like underneath you. Notice where it's supporting your body. See if you can soften down into that. Notice your feet. Maybe allow them to feel heavier and supported by the ground. Notice your legs. Maybe allow the legs to feel heavier and supported by the ground. Notice the back of your pelvis or the back of your hips, your sit bones. Maybe you can allow them to feel a little more firmly rooted in the earth, right? Even imagine growing roots from your body into the earth, holding you in place, if that's okay. Notice the muscles in your abdomen. Maybe allow for a little softness there. Maybe the low spine can release a little bit. Notice where you feel your breath. Where do you feel your body expanding when you breathe in? Where do you feel it contracting when you breathe out? Notice the muscles across your collarbones. Maybe allow them to soften a little bit so that the tops of the shoulders and the upper arms can feel supported by their connection to the ground. Notice the muscles along the back of your neck. Maybe you can find a little bit of release there, allowing the head to feel heavy. Notice the muscles in your face and your jaw. Maybe allowing the jaw to relax a little bit. Maybe the teeth and the lips part a little. Notice the muscles around your eyes, maybe softening those muscles, allowing the eyes to feel a bit heavier. Maybe the muscles between the brows and in the forehead. Take just a few breaths here. You can stay here longer if you like to, but when you're ready to come out, bend the knees, placing the feet flat on the floor. Maybe bring the knees in toward the torso, maybe a little rocking again. And then when you're ready, you can either roll up to sit or roll to one side and use your hands to press up to a seated position. And that's it. Again, feel free to go out and look at my other videos if there's something that speaks to you. You can do any part of this practice independently. You don't have to do it all together. I do recommend warming up first before doing sun salutations or anything strenuous. All right. Thanks so much for sharing your practice with me.